We wrapped up the last section talking about the idea of composition. Composition is the idea of placing one component inside of another component. And we started to talk about using this thumbnail right here as an example. We're going to create a thumbnail component that has nested inside of it our badge component to replace one of these buttons. So let's go ahead and get started. Inside of Finder, we're going to go to our project directory, and we're just going to copy paste our badge folder and then rename it thumbnail. Inside of the thumbnail folder, I'm going to open index.html. Here's our badge, terrific. And then in our code editor, at the terminal, we'll open up our index.html file inside of our code editor. And here we go. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to spruce up our body tag right here just a little bit. And we're just going to do this because some of the styling in React works assuming that we have some classes and some HTML structure in here existing. So we'll get started by adding a new div with a class of row. And inside of row, we'll have div with class of call sm, and we'll do 5. Close that. And outside of the div class row, we'll do one more with div class container. Like so, and terrific. Now, I'm going to add one more class onto the innermost div here, and we're going to call it target, and you'll see why in just a second. If you remember, back down here at the bottom, after we created our badge element, we then rendered it into our body at location document.body. So now we don't want to render our component into document.body anymore. We want to render it into this innermost div. And we're going to do that by using this class target right here. At the bottom, we'll replace document.body with a selector, and we'll say document.querySelector of class target. Terrific. Let's save and refresh the page to make everything still works. Make sure everything still works. Yep, terrific. But you can see that the HTML or the positioning here changed a little bit because we updated the HTML. So let's keep rolling. Like we said earlier, our goal here is to create a new thumbnail component. So we already have a badge component, but we also want a thumbnail one as well. So we'll do that by writing some boilerplate here that's going to get really familiar as this course goes on. We'll say var thumbnail is React create class, and then pass it an object. We'll define our render function, and for right now we'll just write return. Now what we want to return from this is the HTML that represents our thumbnail component. So rather than write out all that HTML, I'm going to flip back over to Bootstrap, and you can see there's all the example HTML here. So we will just go ahead and save ourselves some typing. We're going to take everything from div class thumbnail to the closing div on the bottom. So I'm going to copy and then paste. And then we'll do just a little bit of cleanup here. Cool. So let's not forget really quick to replace our class with class name. As a real quick aside, you might be wondering, why are we using class name down here, but at the top we just have class? And the answer to that is that when we're writing code up here, we're actually writing two types of code within this single document. Up here we have raw HTML, but inside of our script tag, because we placed the text JSX type on here, everything down in here is actually JSX. So it's not HTML, it's JSX down here. And when we're writing our JSX, we use class name, not class. Okay, let's do one more thing. Down here where we create our element, instead of creating an instance of badge, let's create an instance of thumbnail. Then we'll save, flip back over to the browser, and let's see what we get when we refresh. Absolutely nothing. So you'll see on here, if we open our code or we open terminal on the side, you'll see expected corresponding JSX closing tag for image. Well, it just so happens that JSX is very unhappy when you don't close your tags. So at the end here, we'll just place a /. We'll save and refresh. All right. So we have something here, no image. We've got some placeholder header and some placeholder description on here. So let's flip back over and remember our strategy for customizing raw HTML. Anything that we want to be dynamic content, we're going to replace with curly braces and a reference to this.props. And then the properties that we pass in will be inside of our options object down here. So let's get started. First, we'll replace the image source, and I'm going to delete the alt here on the side really quick, with a reference to this.props. And then we need to reference some actual property inside of there, so I'm just going to make up a property here on the spot. We'll call it image URL. Next, we'll do the same for the H3. We'll do our curly braces, and we'll say this.props, and we'll call this one header. .header. We'll do this.props.description, and we'll save, flip back over, and we get absolutely nothing here. Well, that makes sense. We haven't actually defined inside of our options object what image URL, header, or description are. So let's do that right now. We'll give it a header of learn React, a description. I'll just say React is a fantastic new library for making fast dynamic pages. And just to give us a little bit longer description, I'm just going to copy paste it over. Don't forget at the end of this line to place a comma. And then finally we need an image URL. And this is going to be a reference to an actual image. So let's go find one that we can use. In our browser, I'm going to open a new tab and then just search for React. At the top, we'll hit images and we'll find an appropriate image. I think this looks pretty good right here, the React logo. I'll view image, and at the top, we get our URL. I'm going to copy paste that, and that's going to become our image URL. Cool. So let's save this, go back over to index.html, we'll refresh the page, and all right, looks like we're getting somewhere here. So this looks like it's pretty good, but our button down at the bottom is still showing static content. We want to replace this button with our badge component instead of just a normal anchor tag. So the way we do that is really very simple. We're going to replace our anchor tags here. At the top above, we have our badge class. So we want to use badge within thumbnail. Well, to nest a component, all we have to do is treat it like it's a normal HTML element, just like it's an image or a div or an H3. We'll have our opening bracket, and then we'll say just badge, and then immediately close the tag with a /. Let's save this and refresh. Alright, so our two buttons are gone and we're replaced with this just tiny little button with nothing in it. So let's think about why no content actually showed up here. Well, it's because we didn't pass in any props. Whenever we're nesting components, we trickle props down through our render structure here. So if we want anything to show up inside of badge, we need to give it some properties itself. For right now, we'll just say title, and title can be, we'll keep it simple, we'll say see tutorials, and then we'll give it a number, and the number will be 32. And I'm not making up these property names. If you remember, our badge component is going to be looking for props.title and props.number. So when we pass in see tutorials as title and 32 as number, badge is going to see this.props.title as see tutorials and this.props.number as 32. Let's go ahead and save and refresh. All right, so this is looking pretty good. We have see tutorials 32. Now there's just one last little refactor that we're going to do here to make this truly a reusable component. We don't actually have to hard code title as see tutorials and numbers 32. We are still getting these properties of title and number that are showing up inside of thumbnail as this.props. So let's take see tutorials and we'll make that our title, and then 32, we'll make that our number, and we'll replace these with this.props.title and this.props.number. So we'll save, refresh, and fantastic. We still have our content in here. Alright, so this is looking pretty good, and we're successfully nesting one component inside of another. So let's continue on to the next section where we're going to learn how to render a list.